you lose sight of what culture is. And I think what culture is and what we tried to demonstrate in this piece is it's this like sort of steady, gradual accumulation of attitudes and actions and practices and personnel decisions. And so I think when you evaluate a team's culture, the health of their work environment, I think it's easy to focus on one person. I think that is, often sometimes what we do that can be a bit myopic. But I think it's perhaps much more instructive to look more structurally, right? To look at some of the entrenched systems in place that allow some of these things that we've reported on to happen. But you're correct that I do think people in positions of authority need to be held accountable and examined. I'm sure Sandy Alderson would not deny the need for that. But I do think that there are other people and other systems in place within the organization that also ought to be scrutinized much further.
Sure. No doubt about it. But, he has so much power in the organization now, Katie. Were you surprised, that Sandy, while, also saying that the Mets are taking steps towards trying to weed out the bad actors here and try to change that culture, it's a big job, that he got pretty defensive about the reporting from The Athletic, like they feel like the Mets are being unfairly targeted here. Were you surprised by that?
No, I wasn't surprised by that. Quite frankly, I expected that to some degree because we have focused some of our reporting on the Mets, and there's a good reason. Though not all of these incidents happened while Mets employees were Mets employees, there has been this common nexus of connection with the Mets. And so, when you sort of approach a story as a reporter, two things kind of help guide an investigative deep dive. If you show that you're willing to write critically about certain issues or organizations, oftentimes people will come out of the woodwork to talk to you and tell you things that they think that you should also look into. So sometimes that directs your attention. But, in addition to that, in this case, we did see this nexus of connection, and we felt it was our responsibility as reporters to pull back the lens and say, hey, the reality is all of these sort of higher profile incidents, Jared Porter, Mickey Callaway, Ryan Ellis, those all happened with people who were at one point Mets employees. So is it worth us sort of, looking under the hood to see if there are some deeper, more systemic issues that might help explain this nexus of connection? And so that's why we did focus our reporting in that way. So to some degree, I can understand where Sandy might feel like that, and I certainly wasn't surprised that some of his frustration reflected that.
Katie, were you surprised? I mean, with the reporting you did about David Newman, were you surprised that Sandy made the decision to bring him back in the organization?
So, I think it's important to make a distinction. The decision to bring him back had already been made, right?
No, I get it.
Sure. But yes, I mean, look, you can always make the point once you hear that, is it reasonable to pump the brakes and reassess? And of course, I think that is, a reasonable question to ask. And I think certainly reasonable to ask, did HR weigh in here to say, hey, maybe we ought to sort of, slow down here and take a look at this person's previous conduct or some issues that have arose in the past, the legal department as well. But, I mean, am I surprised? No, in the sense of, I think some of the issues that we have seen across baseball, across sports when it comes to issues of pervasive cultural concerns, I think there can be a lack of turnover sometimes within organizations, and we see this all the time, in baseball and in other sports about people hiring friends of theirs, people that they've worked with, people that come from the sort of the same trees of coaching and executives. that they came from. So there's not a lot of sort of infusion of fresh vision and perspective sometimes. I think baseball has been slow to change and to seek out diversity in candidates, not just diverse in the traditional sense, but diverse in the sense of viewpoints and experience. And I think when you don't have that level of turnover or that injection of fresh perspectives, I think sometimes it can lead people to revert to, comfortable people that they're comfortable with, hiring practices that they're comfortable with. And I think if you don't have people around you to challenge you on some of those hiring practices or those practices to evaluate personnel, I think that's where issues can arise.
Katie Strang is joining us, senior writer for The Athletic, and has been doing a lot of reporting and been involved with all the pieces that have come out about the Mets and about their hiring practices, their culture, and really just kind of a state of the Mets beyond what's going on the field. Katie, Joe DeVito, who was one of the executives in charge of content, social media, he now has taken a step back, leaving the organization after some employees kind of alleging sexual harassment, flirtation behavior, text messages going over the line, that type of thing. Is Joe DeVito leaving the organization, was that a result of this law firm, Wilmer Hale, coming in to vet the Mets and trying to clean up some of and get rid of some of the bad actors who are in the Mets? Was that a direct result of that investigation, do you know?
Not to my knowledge, which is not to say that didn't have a factor, but I can't, confirm that with any degree of specificity. I don't, I haven't gotten a sense that is the case from our reporting, which again doesn't mean it's not. Mm-hmm. What I can tell you is that in the wake of some of the reporting that has been done about other people involved with the Mets, some women have come forward to express concerns about his behavior and let the Mets know about that behavior. So I do think, when you look at sort of the reckoning that has been happening over the last few months, a lot of it is really depressing and can be, really sort of dispiriting. But if there's any sort of silver lining, I think it is, in some cases, emboldening and empowering people to speak out and to seek out accountability. And I do believe that's what happened here in the case of Joe DeVito.
Katie, with that, though, do you think in order to get, because it's the HR department, it's DeVito, it's Alderson bringing Newman back, it's the allegations, everything that that you guys did a tremendous job reporting, you, Britt, and Ken, in this latest piece in The Athletic, what would, if you were Cohen here, is this just a cleaning of the house? Let's start again. Let's start anew. Look at the leadership that we have within this organization. Is it a case of trying to rehab, making people understand this behavior? Telling somebody to knock it off is not good enough. What are the next steps here if you're Steve Cohen and the Mets and you're taking this piece in?
I think, I think if Steve Cohen can take a really definitive action, and if I were Steve Cohen and I wanted to take a really constructive, definitive action, I think the number one thing that I think would be important to do is to listen. I think I would try my very hardest to create an honest, open, transparent environment in which employees felt comfortable to share their concerns. And if you do that and you create, sort of a safe workplace environment where people feel comfortable being honest, I think that can help you identify the problems. I think there are people within that organization that feel that, retaining that law firm, Wilmer Hale, to conduct that external investigation is a good sign that, he's being proactive about trying to identify and discern some of the more problematic areas of the company. I think there are some people that are probably skeptical about how sincere those efforts will be. I think it's premature to probably make a deduction either way. I think it will hinge on whether, one, employees will feel comfortable being open and honest, whether what they share will be listened to and acted upon, and what sort of changes are made going forward. I think it's easy to say blow everyone out, right?
Right.
But the reality is, one of the things that really resonated with me is there are a lot of really wonderful, hardworking people within that organization. And I actually think that's why people chose to talk to us, because I think there are a lot of people internally who love that team and that organization, have given their life to working for that team and that organization, that want to see the team and the organization to be its best version of itself. And so I think if you can show your employees that you're not afraid of criticism and that you can embrace constructive criticism, I think that's a really healthy step toward a more productive work environment.
Katie, from the Mets employees that you talk to, do they feel like things are getting better, or do they feel like they have not seen any real significant changes in that big, broad term of culture? Do they feel like it's all same old, same old?
I think it's too soon to tell, to be quite honest. I can tell you this. When Steve Cohen came in that introductory press conference, and he talked about culture, and he talked about running a team with integrity and professionalism and embracing diversity, I think there were people internally that thought, hey, this might be a real sea change here. And, we're feeling optimistic and hopeful that this will be, sort of a very different feel from how it felt under, the previous ownership. And I will say that I think people really felt that optimism and that sense of hope take a blow when they did see David Newman rehired, because they felt like it was a signal that it might just be more of the same. So I think there's kind of a wait and see approach. With this Wilmer Hale investigation, my understanding is that, employees have been pretty enthusiastic about sharing their concerns. But I think it's going to take, real tangible evidence that those concerns are being listened to and acted upon to determine whether a commitment to cultural change is sincere.
Katie, last one for me. I just want to follow up on that, and that is back to Alderson and his leadership. Employees' opinion. Do they, from those that you talk to, you mentioned there's a lot of wonderful people, love the Mets, want to see this organization be healthy, top to bottom, and run properly. Is there a confidence that Sandy is the right guy? Is there a trust amongst the employees that you talk to on the record that Sandy is the right guy to lead them there?
You know what? That's a good question, and I don't think we focused a ton of our reporting on that question. Perhaps we should have. But I will say, I do think in general, Sandy is regarded internally as a well-liked and respected person. But I do think, I think it's complicated. I do think that, there is concern that he did rehire someone that people had issues and created some internal turmoil. I think, they also want to see what, Sandy Alderson means when he says he's committed to, cultural change. And, it's one thing to say that. It's another thing to demonstrate that you do have a sincere commitment to that. So I think time will tell.
Gotcha.
But I can't say definitively with any sort of confidence.
Well, Katie, great job. Thank you for giving us your great 20 minutes.
Thank
we
you.
appreciate it. Tremendous reporting, you, Britt, and Ken in the piece, and we continued success. All right, Katie, thank you.
Thank you.